There was opportunities here. Now, I didn't know how I was going to take advantage because I didn't have much. I came to St. George out of the Army with my wife and Russ, like I mentioned before, and $800. And that was the net worth of who me and my wife were.
Oh, once I lived in Cottonwood and owned a little farm. When they called me down to Dixie, it caused me much alarm. To hoe the cane and cotton, I right away must go. But the reason why they sent me, I'm sure I do not know.
Welcome to Not Forgotten, a podcast brought to you by the Doc Booth Foundation and hosted by noted writer Lyman, who has chronicled the stories, culture, and character of Utah's Dixie for more than 40 years. We'd like to invite our listeners to attend our annual benefit dinner for the Doc Booth Foundation on April 25th, 2026 at 6 p.m. at the Dixie Convention Center. This year, we're honoring Ted Spilsbury, who has been a beloved pillar in this community. If you can attend or would like to donate, you can buy tickets at docboothfoundation.org. Please plan on joining us.
It's another one of those amazing days in Utah's Dixie. The sun is shining. It's February and it feels like spring out there. It's pretty amazing. But it feels really good here in this studio too today because I'm joined by some really wonderful people with Ken Newby and some of his children, Grag and Lacy and Lindsey. It's so good to have you here with us today. You're representing the rest of your family, so you got a big duty here today. It's great to just be able to sit down, Ken, with you and some of your family and talk about the Newby family and Dixie and how those two things connect. And I wondered if we could just start with you telling us, how is it that the Newby family is here in St. George?
I didn't want to come to St. George when I was single, but I was working in Salt Lake, and I hated Salt Lake, the weather, the traffic. I just wanted to go back to Monroe and be whoever I was going to be.
And that's where you grew up?
That's where I grew up. But then I decided I wanted to stay with the Standard Oil of California service stations. And I wanted to stay with them. And they had a station in Beaver and a Cedar and St. George. And I put in for Beaver. And they said, they don't need Cedar. Now, St. George has got an opening. So I came to St. George. And
when would this have been, Ken?
1961, fall. And I remember the very first week I worked on the station. It was cold when I left Salt Lake. And it was warm. 7 o'clock at night, it's warm. And it was just befuddling. But anyway, I came to St. George. I spent the first week, probably more like 2 weeks, staying at the Liberty Hotel.
Really? You had that experience, huh?
That old hotel light would blink, and I'm in there. You had to use the bathroom with somebody if you went. It was pretty crude.
I don't know if I know anybody who lived at the Liberty Hotel.
Well, I got out of there probably a couple of weeks. But then, meeting people, I really met Robin Hanson and Gary Carter. We'd be over to the Big Hand, and they would go in there for their morning coffee. And so I actually started drinking coffee. I didn't like it, but just to sit there with them, I had a little coffee. But I finally gave that up, and the thing I had on my back was I was eligible for the draft, and I was close to being called. And so I thought, well, I'll just live this out till I get drafted. But in the meantime, I meet my wife. She was Robin's niece, and Robin had invited me and Gary down to the VFW where Robin's brother worked, Russell. I don't know if you know the family.
Yes.
Okay. And we get in there, and Russ said, hey, they're having a meeting in here tonight. You can't play the fights. We had a boxing fight we wanted to see. And Jeanette had left her little boy with a babysitter, and she didn't want us to go there. But Robin said, heck with it. we're going down to my house. So that's where we went. And I was sitting there minding my business and waiting for the fight to start and idle chatter. Here comes this cute girl walking by. And I looked at her. He told me I had to sit her there, but didn't say anything about her. So anyway, she got in the fridge and did something and turned and come around. And I got a real good view of her when she turned and come around, and then she left. A couple days later, or maybe even one, back to the Big Hand Cafe for coffee. Robin was there, and I says, who was that cute girl that was tending Robin Jr.? And he said, that's my niece, and don't you even think about it. And so I didn't. And being a stranger in town, you don't make too many waves because you just don't know people. And so this story, I'll end it short. We dated. I did call her.
You can't just jump to that.
Okay.
You can. So somehow you got past what Robin had told you.
Yes. I got past what Robin said. And so I just thought, I'll see her. She works at the Big Hand. I was working across the street, the station. So if we'd go over for coffee or off-time sandwich, something. I saw her a couple times in there. Never really got friendly with her because of Robin. And then one day I went in, ordered a cup of coffee, and one of the gals working in there come over and said, she called my wife Boomer, I think it was Boomer. She said, Boomer wants you to come and pick her up. And I didn't really know her as Boomer. I'd heard her name Cheryl. And I said, you mean Cheryl? She says, yeah. I said, she wants me to pick her up? And I thought it was a hoax between Robin and her, and tell me to get lost. I don't know. But anyway, I said, okay. So I went out and got in my car, and I started driving up. And right where the frost top was, that's about where she was. And so I just pulled in real slow, not knowing what to expect. Had the window down, and I said, did you want me to pick you up? And she was right there to the door, looking in, said, I thought you'd never get here. And so that's where I started.
And her name?
Cheryl Peterson.
Cheryl Peterson. And so that's how it is that we have the Newby family here in St. George.
Yes. I did get drafted, and I went in the Army for 2 years, Fort Ord for training, and then they shipped me out to North Carolina to be in the 82nd Airborne, but I didn't ever jump or things like that. We were mechanical people, that if they had a problem, we fixed it. After 2 years, one of the years we were back there, we had Russ. He was born in North Carolina.
Now we're to about, mid-1960s now?
That would have been 1964.
Or?
Yeah, 1965 in June, we got discharged. We loaded up everything in the car. Everything we owned was in that car. 1956 Chevy Bel Air, two-door hardtop, very pretty car. And anyway, we made our way home, and I had the option to go back to work for Standard or do whatever. But at that same month we got home, Cheryl's Uncle Robin owned a service station in Boulder City. Him and Gary had actually 2 stations. And Robin was going to build a shop for a transmission shop. And he asked me if I'd like to come down and manage his station while he was doing that. I had intentions of going to college, but so I looked at Cheryl, she looked at me, and we said, yeah, let's go. At least we'll have a place to live for a while. And so I went to Boulder City and worked for Robin. And that lasted about 5 months. And I decided I wanted to come back to St. George and go to college, be a coach. But when we got home, found out that Jack Segmiller and his wife had this little Chevron. You remember Jack?
Yeah.
And they were divorcing. So that station was going to be available. And I called my brother. He was in Phoenix teaching school. And I called him and told him the station was going to be available. But there's a lot of people who wanted it. And I says, I want you to come up, and you know I will go talk to Cliff. He was the general manager of the station, and 3 others. Long story short, I guess, Cheryl had Shep. We call him Shep because of my Cheryl.
Uh-huh. So your brother's name
It's Cheryl.
Cheryl, but you called him Shep.
Yep.
And I'm sure you'll tell us more about Shep as we go on here.
And anyway, he had to work till the Christmas holidays teaching. When Shep came, we did talk to Cliff. And he says, I've got to interview 2 or 3 more guys. And he said, I'll let you know. And so the next day, he called and said, I'll let you guys take the station. And so Shep and I formed a partnership, called it Newby Oil Company. And I would open the station, he would close it. Then he would open, I'd close it. He'd open. We worked that because really we didn't have any money. My mom and dad mortgaged their home for $5,000, and Shep's wife's mother had Canaryville property, and she mortgaged it for $7,500. Between the two, we paid off all the bills.
And Ken, this station was where?
4th East and St. George Boulevard. It's gone. There's a bank there.
Yeah.
So anyway,
basically Flood Street off the boulevard. At which corner? Was it the south?
it would have been the north.
Or the north. It was the north.
There was a motel across.
Okay. Got it.
But anyway, that's where we started in our business. And we knew they were going to build a new Chevron also. And so that gave us each a station. We got that Chevron built, Stanner did, and he went to the new Chevron. And I was in the process of trying to get a Shell station that they were building by the frost top. And I saw some guys doing something, grading and shooting it, making sure it's square or whatever. So I stopped to ask, and they told me they were building a station. And so I got some information. And I literally called the guy in Vegas and asked him if he ever came to St. George to check on the station. And he said, I'm coming up next week. And so I made arrangements to meet him. And we were off and running.
And this was at a time when St. George was still a pretty
6,000 people.
And by now you had 2 or 3 stations between you and Shep?
When I got the Shell station, Shell was nowhere to be found in Utah, that brand. A lot of people would quiz me. And so I put 2 and 2 together, got a hold of the general manager and asked if I could build a bulk plant so they could haul bulk fuel to me. And then I could haul it to whoever. And I'd change some stations into Shell. And they said, yeah, it's a great idea. So we did that. And I did that. I'd work the station all day, haul gas at night. And then a couple of years go by, and Joy, Cheryl's dad, I'd changed the station at the old dealership from Chevron to Shell. So I got acquainted with Joy, even though I was married to his daughter. He was always horse trading something. He came to me one day and said, hey, I bought these 20 beautiful Hereford heifers, but I can't pay for it. Do you want to buy them? And long story short, we bought them, and we ended up getting in the cattle business with him. And we'd lost our place over in Ivans to run them in the winter. And so we were looking around, and H. Hafen was our accountant, and he told me, he said, Ken, Ron Cannon has got a place out on the Tule Desert, and he's looking for somebody to put some cows out there with him. So we said, good, we'll do it. And so we took our cows out that first winter. We hauled a lot of water. We utilized it a lot better. So we got involved there, And after we went and got our cows out of there for summer, Ron approached Val asking if he wanted to buy his allotment. And Val called me and asked me if I wanted to. And he kind of wanted to be a partner with us. And so we did. We bought Ron Cannon. And then there was 4 other ranchers out there that had cattle permits. And they all called us, said, buy ours. So we took 5 different ranches and made one out of them.
You're in the oil business.
Yeah,
You're in the service station business.
yeah,
You're in the cattle business.
yeah.
But you're also in the family business.
Right.
And let's talk a little bit about your family, because you and Cheryl have raised such a wonderful family, and a family that is so indicative of this old Dixie spirit. I'm sitting here looking at Greg and Lacy and Lindsey and thinking, oh my goodness, they're looking at you telling this origin story of your family. And I think it'd be fun maybe to hear from them their perspective of all of this. And I don't know, Lacy, could you start us off? Maybe just share some of your thoughts and memories.
Sure. I am grateful that my parents, we lived in both places we've lived in, on Diagonal and Bloomington, are both the best places to grow up. And I was just always thankful that I had such awesome friends. And we all went to school together. We played sports together. We did basically everything. And that was back when we had Woodward. And it was so fun to have all the kids go to school there. And then I don't know, it's funny because we were by 7th and 8th grade year, they had us going to Pineview when we moved to Bloomington. And so I was like, man, I'm going to lose all my friends. But I had met some at Woodward. And so that would work. And then they finally bussed us back over my freshman year. So I was glad about that, because I would have been an outsider not graduating from Dixie High School. Me and Lindsey probably. But so I was so glad they changed that back. And so, yeah, we all did the whole Dixie High School route, Dixie College route. Dixie College was a blast.
Tell me, Lacy, what was it like growing up on Diagonal when you were a little girl? What did you do on
A
Diagonal?
lot of night games, a lot of playing at the park. The Bluff Street Park was the best. Now Sandtown Park, I think. And did Craig Booth rename it that? I can't remember if he did or not. Okay.
He gets credit for that.
Yeah, because my mom would always say, I'm from Sandtown. And so we would hear that a lot. So that's cute that they renamed it that. But I grew up playing soccer, City League soccer there my whole life, and just playing with my friends, a lot of night games, a lot of just...
Who were your friends on Diagonal?
Like Brittany Booth, Holly Jackson, Lori Stevens, Brandy Spilsbury, and all those, some of their parents still live there. And that's why it's back to saying that is we were lucky that our parents didn't bounce around a lot. And so we all grew up together and went to the same elementary schools. And because I see that with my kids where no one really sticks around. They have to move for jobs and stuff. And so they're always like, man, I'm jealous that you have friends that you still know and that have known me even since kindergarten. Cindy MacArthur, just all these great families, great names that, are just great people. Their parents were great people, and we were so lucky.
And isn't it true that those of us who got to grow up here, we are really lucky?
Yeah.
Greg, what are your
I'm a little older than my 2 sisters here, and I grew up in Sandtown when it was raw. On Saturdays, your parents kicked you out of the house and said, hey, you got to go make your own entertainment. I think we had 3 or 4 TV stations maybe. We didn't have a lot, but I can remember climbing the Red Hill. We'd climb clear to the top of the Red Hill. I remember night games, like Lacy said. I remember getting together at that park, and we'd play baseball with all the neighborhood kids. You made your own fun. You dug huts in vacant lots and took candles down there, and that's what you did. And I remember in the middle of the summer, thank goodness the ditches were running up there, and you'd get in the ditches and you'd dam the ditches up and you'd get all wet there, and all the neighbor kids would join in, and I had a great childhood growing up. I remember we got some motorbikes one Christmas, and boy, we thought we'd hit it big. And I remember we'd have to sneak them up out of town to get into Dixie Downs. But once you got up there a ways, you got into that Dixie Downs when there was no development out there. We would ride motorbikes all day Saturday, and we'd be mad that we couldn't ride them on Sunday. Our parents wouldn't let us go on Sunday. We had to go to church. But hey, we had a great childhood. We had a great time growing up and just really enjoyed living on Diagonal in Sandtown there.
Who are some of your friends?
I remember the Langs. They had a lot of kids. There was always something going on at the Langs. We had the Katarskis next door to us. When I was a young kid, I'd get up at 6 in the morning and I'd go next door. And 6 a.m., I'd leave our house and go next door and go hang out with the Katarskis all morning. And my parents would let me. It's the best part. You can't do that nowadays. I remember the houses. I remember the Coxes up there. There was the Fellers. There was always something going on because you had to make your excitement. There was a bike ride on a Saturday afternoon. We used to ride bikes everywhere. And we'd leave our house and meet our cousin in the middle of town, and we'd ride up to McKnight Sporting Goods and stop at McDonald's and get a burger. And I look back at those days, and the kids today, they can't even do that stuff. Their parents won't let them, and I don't blame them. But we had an amazing childhood. We really had it good growing up.
I think about that a lot, Greg, how, you'll be driving through a neighborhood now and you won't see any kids out playing and you're wondering where they are. And you kind of imagine they've got a device in their hand or they're doing something somewhere. But there still are neighborhoods, even like this one where we are right now, where the kids can still get out and they can run pretty wild if they have that opportunity. But it's a lot different now than when we were growing up.
Like him saying that we would ride our bikes everywhere. Like some of our kids don't even know how to ride bikes because they didn't need them. They've got motorized things.
Yeah.
But riding our bikes down to Ace, Ben Franklin was just ideal.
That was my childhood down there.
Lindsey, what are your
My memory's
memories?
not quite as sharp as theirs because I was running the streets on Diagonal when I was 4 and 5 and 6. We moved when I was, I think, December or January 1st after the flood. But I remember so much because I would have Brock Spilsbury show up about 7:30 in the morning, and he had a plan kind of start to finish, and I'd leave the house early, and I don't think we came home till the street lights came on, but we would go, he'd say, hey, let's go see how the coins in your dad's little ashtray, or my dad has so many coins, so we'd go get coins. He'd be like, let's get the silver stuff, let's go down to 7-Eleven. And I believe James's wife worked there because she'd always gripe at us, and we'd come in, get a slushie and ride our bikes and go over to right down to Ben Franklin, see what we could get from the cheap section, and we ran those streets like it was just. And then we'd head over to the park with our treats and whether we got a yo-yo that day or whatever, Jacks. We would go buy something and then go over to the Despain boys or Marcy Lemon, Ron and Jolene Lemon. I was really good friends with their daughter, Marcy, or we'd go pick up Dusty Ellett and just go play at the park all day.
That's great.
Play night games. And I even remember playing night games at Kay Peterson's house with every age. Lacy was there. Sometimes Brad was there. The kids were probably 5 to 16 years old or 15 years old, and it was just nonstop fun. We'd build huts next door to our house where we lived. It was a vacant lot for quite a while, if my memory is right, and we would build huts, till the sun went down. So that was just always so fun. And another thing I loved in my childhood we had moved from Diagonal, but I loved growing up in the Dixie area, being involved with everything. We knew all the basketball players, the Runnin' Rebels. We knew all the players. He'd take them to Pizza Factory. That was one of my favorite memories, too, is being involved at the college or watching my sister play soccer at Dixie High School or Dixie College. We've always been pretty rooted in the heart of Dixie, whether we lived in Bloomington or Dixie, and it was so fun. We knew everybody, it felt like. Everyone would say, are you Ken Newby's daughter? And I loved that growing up because I felt like I belonged.
And you could always go back to that ashtray for a little more.
Oh, yeah. There was always silver coins.
It's like your personal silver mine. Huh? That's great. What about Bloomington? What about that transition from Diagonal?
So it was fun because even though it was a little more spread out over there, I made a lot of friends really quick. And I think my parents didn't know what to do with me because they were where Bloomington Drive is over on the golf course side of Bloomington, and I lived over on the Ranches side, if that's what it's called. And so one of my best friends in 3rd grade lived 6 miles away from me, and I wanted these new scooters that had a motor on them, so my dad got me 2 of them for Christmas. and you just pull start those and you could go all day. And I had one for a friend, and we would ride to the Bloomington market. We'd go pick up our whole friend group, and soon everybody started getting them. Like Rod Orton's son got one, and Jeff Adams' daughter had a couple. We just would ride those scooters to the market, to the country club pool, and swim because he was a member golfing there. So we grew up swimming in there right when it opened, but I spent my whole high school, I think I signed in about 5 or 6 friends a day on the tab in the summer to swim and eat at the snack bar. And we even did that with our babies when we had kids. We would still go to the country club. But wow. So it was fun to grow up in Bloomington. I would walk with a bunch of my friends to school, and just it's still so many friends, a little spread out, but Dad figured out a way to get a scooter where we could get to each other quick, and we all started rolling around with those scooters. So it was fun.
What you're describing, though, is how all of your childhoods and the childhoods of all your contemporaries, regardless of where you lived in town, you had that neighborhood feeling and just that special feeling, even though it was more spread out in Bloomington. And that's not unique to St. George or to Dixie, but it is pretty special here.
Definitely.
I'm sitting here hearing you guys remember your childhoods, and then I'm looking at your dad and thinking, and he was working all day at the station and driving truck all night and building this amazing business and this legacy of the Newby family. And I think that as well is indicative of that whole Dixie spirit, how our generations got to grow up in such an idyllic situation, but our parents really worked their tails off. And I know you guys work hard too. We all work hard now too, but our parents really set something special up for us to be able to live the lives we live.
Just to add to that, I remember on those hot Saturdays, we'd go on our bike rides, and we would be tired, and we'd end up at my cousin Troy Newby's house, and it was a long ways away from our house. I remember calling on the phone to try to get my mom or dad to come and get us, and they wouldn't. Nope, you're going to have to walk home. You're going to have to ride those bikes home. But they were busy. They were busy making things that we get to enjoy today, and those types of things, I think they build a little more backbone in us. Yeah. Now, my kids call me, I'm way too soft. But my parents towed the line and said, no, you're going to ride that bike home. I know it's hot, but you can do it.
Every generation has that. Lindsey, you were talking about how you had to pull start your scooter. Now all they have to do is turn the switch on.
And I smelled like gas when I got home.
And then what's the next generation going to say? It'll be different. And you'll be saying, we had to pull start ours anyway. Or they'll be saying, we had to actually turn the switch on. But it's pretty amazing what our parents and our ancestors gave us. And maybe that could bring us back to you, Ken, because you've got us into the service station and oil business and cows, but then it went on from there.
Every one of those jobs would have problems occasionally. The truck that I hauled gas to another station, or sometimes, especially in the summer, you wouldn't get your diesel load of fuel till late sometimes. Not that they tried to be late, it was just busy. Come out of Vegas, and if there was ever a wreck, they couldn't. But basically everything really went our way. The station, the Shell station, when we got it, I went to California, went to a dealer training school, and went through that, got certified, and hired some good help, and that gave me time to do a little ranching. As we got into that ranching, it got bigger and bigger because we had the funds to buy more cattle if we wanted to. Now, he had some, but he didn't have enough to do it alone. And I remember he came to me one day and he says, I just bought 60 cows from Atkins. They're out on the strip. We got to go get them. But anyway, they had made arrangements. They had a big cattle hauler, and they had made arrangements to bring them in. And I can't even remember what the bill was. But we lacked a little money ourselves. And I had a friend, Clyde Cannon, in Pine Valley, that I put the hit on him for, I think, $20,000. And he wrote me a check. And, of course, we paid the cows off. We paid the bill back to him. But it just seemed like there was always something that took you to that particular
the next step
thing you were doing. But we kept all the ranch, and we still run anywhere from 350 to 500 cows. You have your brother running it, and I love. He is so good. I don't know what I'd do without him.
He loves doing it, and he loves you, and he appreciates it very much. He's one of the few people who can say he's a full-time cowboy.
Yeah, he is. But I don't know. I love being involved. Now, Shep, he could go to his station every day, and that's where he stayed. I don't think he ever hauled any fuel. I don't think he ever came down to the Shell station and visited with our crew. But we were busy. We had family things. We had church things. And, my kids, they really didn't know what kind of guy I was. I'm always gone, and I'd come home, and things had to be just dried, or I got chewed out. But I couldn't have done it without my wife. She's been the kingpin of everything, because she stayed home, took care of the kids, and she never worked other than housework. But I remember the day Greg and Russ came home, and they said, Dad, they were going to school in Cedar. It was their senior or junior year, I forget. They said, Dad, we're learning about people like you. They didn't know what I was or who I was. I didn't try to be anything different than somebody that was busy. But it finally dawned on them that maybe Dad's not quite as dumb as we thought he was.
Yeah, I'm sure you had several doctoral degrees in many things by that time.
Yeah.
Just can maybe get us into the car business.
That's another deal with Joy Peterson. We're working hard, and we got everything we need to be very successful. He comes in and says, hey, I've got an opportunity to buy the franchise. We had Buick, GMC, Pontiac, and then later got Oldsmobile. But he says, I don't have the money to do it. And there's a guy in Salt Lake that wants it, and he's got the money. And I said, let me talk to my brother. So we did. We had a powwow. He basically said, do what you want. I think he thought to himself, I've been doing everything else, so you do that too. But we did. We bought the franchises, and I let my father-in-law kind of run it. But I would come around to check things because I didn't know. A service station is a little different than a car dealer. And I spent quite a bit of time with the reps, like the Pontiac rep and the Oldsmobile rep, learning all I could. I went to Salt Lake and spent the day with the best Buick GMC dealer he had in the whole deal, and this guy helped me a lot. But we got the franchises. Joy was doing the kind of the office stuff, but Joy wasn't a salesman. He was a hard worker, and I think he was honest. But the cattle business has started getting a little heavier. We needed some more help. And I said, Joy, why don't you go to the ranch? I'll send you a check. And if I can't make this work, then we will sell it to the guy in Salt Lake. But as I got involved in it, I went right to work. I ordered inventory, things like that. He didn't dare get any inventory because we had to pay flooring. And I wasn't afraid of that. St. George was starting to grow. And so we finally had 8 or 10 units out front for sale. I don't know, one thing went to another. He went to the ranch. We did everything else. I did it a lot. Shep took good care of his station. And then we had a parting of the way with Joy. He got a little bit feisty on some things and made some moves we didn't like. And so we had to sit down and talk with him. And we said, you run the ranch, Joy. We'll support you. And so that's where he went. And then probably a year, maybe 2, we separated away from him in the ranch. He took this, we took that. And I was busy with everything. We'd meet together at the ranch a little bit, but he knew I could get it done, and I did. But now we're getting into about 70s and the mid-80s. Shep and I were still partners, but I went to him one day. I said, our kids are getting old enough that we need to place them somewhere in what we do. I said, I want my boys to come to the dealership, and you can have yours go to the oil company. And that didn't quite work out. It seemed like a couple of years went by, or maybe a little more. He and I got along okay, but we had a family picnic over in Monroe on the 25th of July, 1994. And he had a massive aneurysm or a heart attack and died right there. And so after all that, funeral and everything, I got with his wife, and she had a representative, and I had a representative, and she'd take this, I'd take that, equities, and it seemed to work okay. But that just put me back with the oil company also, trying to help them a little. I went to a board meeting and things like that. Shep would come to those. But I decided that I wanted to build a new dealership because the old one was right in the middle of busy traffic all the time. And we had property across the street from the building, and people crossing the street was a little dangerous.
And that original dealership was on the west end of St. George Boulevard, where Smith's, and Walgreens is.
Walgreens is there. Yeah. So we sold all that to Walgreens and divided up other things. And then I went on my own and bought the property where the dealership is. And I was all me doing that. Now, Shep had passed, and Jerry was left without a husband. She had a little rocky time liking me, but it's all worked out. It took time, and we've kept the cattle business and the car business, and I got out of everything else. And I always wanted my children to be involved in the dealership, or I would even take a cowgirl for the ranch.
Allergic, right?
I was going to ask the two of you, tell me about your ranch experience.
We didn't even really know where it was, and I had a lot of people make fun of us. We'd never been out there.
I took them out to Barkley.
That might be something that you discover in the future.
Yeah.
It was funny because they all drove a brand new car, or I don't know, the most expensive car we sell. And here come a line of them, 5 different cars.
That's great.
Dust to fly in. And long story short, they never wanted to go back because it's too dirty.
There's no bathroom.
There was a bathroom.
By that standard, it was.
My Uncle Eldon always said the bathroom's as big as all outdoors.
Yeah.
It's the biggest bathroom you'll ever find. I'm looking at you, Greg, and I'm thinking, okay, your dad's talking about the dealership and the evolution of that. And you've been a part of that, you and Russ and your other brother, Brad. And tell us about that, what that's meant in your lives.
As we were going to college and working on graduating, Russ and I, a little ahead of Brad, but Russ and I were close to the same age and close to doing the same things. We graduated college about the same time, but early on in our career, my dad would take us to these conventions, and we felt like fish out of water. We were sitting there going, oh, do we even belong here? It's pretty foreign to us, but he got us into it early, and we started learning at an early age about the car business and about the potential and about what we could do. And so when we both graduated from college, we knew what we wanted to do. We wanted to get into that car dealership. And he started us. I don't know about my brother Russ, but I've probably had almost every single job in that dealership. You know, he believed in starting us from the ground up and saying, hey, if you're going to take over and run this, you need to know a lot, and you need to know how to wash a car. You need to know about parts, service, that type of thing. So he tutored us well, and it was never a situation where I ever felt it was forced. It was like, this is an opportunity if you guys want it. And one of our brothers at first said, maybe I don't want it. And he went somewhere else for a while. Thank goodness he saw the light and came back and joined, and now he's one of the partners. But we got involved early. We loved the car business. Both Russ and I loved it. Brad eventually came back, and I know Lacy and Lindsey love it too, and they've been great supporters of us. But we got started early, and we worked our way up through the rings, and now our number one job sometimes just get along as brothers so we can keep things going. But we've been able to pull that off, and we've done it actually quite well.
And that's what's awesome about your family story, because family businesses are a challenge. And you start with one generation, brothers, and then you come to another generation. And it's rocky, just as Ken has pointed out, and there are the ups and downs. But as a family, you have emerged from all of that, in, at least from my perspective, in a really wonderful way. A very successful way.
And that's a great point. That my dad, I think, as he was coming up in the car business, he was telling people he wanted to bring his boys into it. And I think very few people ever said that was a good idea. The majority of them said, Ken, that's going to be a mistake. You're not going to want to do that. They're not going to want to get along. They're not going to get along. They're going to fight. It's just not going to work out. We've made it work out. We bought the dealership from my dad about 8 years ago, and so far, we've made it work, but we've had a great tutor. We've had a great coach. Our dad has said, this can be great if you three can get along, and our sisters have supported our buyout, and they're still part of the business. And it's just, I have to give a lot of credit for my dad.
And that's so awesome how Ken mentioned it earlier, that you discovered. You had to go to college to discover how smart your dad was. And it's so true that no college professor could know what he knows and has done what he's done. And you have to go to college, but you really have to do it to really know it.
And it gets a little tricky in college, because when you get in there, you start thinking you're pretty sharp. You start feeling a little more educated, and then, of course, you get humbled. But yeah, it was in those college years that we realized that, hey, it'd be great to continue in business with our dad. He's a special guy. And we were lucky to come to that and realize that not everybody treats their kids the way your dad, your parents, your mom. We've been lucky, we've been blessed. And hopefully we never forget that.
That's awesome. And I'll, for the record, I see Lacy and Lindsey nodding their heads to everything you just said. It's also, to me, it's such an amazing thing to consider that when you started, Ken, that was back in the Podunk St. George days. Not that we ever thought of as Podunk, but the world did. And the businesses that you started took a lot of faith, a lot of guts, a lot of
prayer.
I was going to say hope, but prayer is the word. And to imagine that they could become successful. And you've brought it all the way from those St. George and the Sticks, the Hick St. George Podunk place, to what it is now. And it's still Newby Buick. It's still Newby, the Newby family. But you've come all the way from those days of less than 6,000 people living here. And I just think that's a wonderful thing to think about. There are so many things that we could talk about today. I'm going to need to start to wrap this up a little bit. But there's a lot of what you've been sharing, all of you, is the Dixie spirit. And I realized that a Ken Newby could have gone anywhere and become successful. But there's something special about this place. And I just wondered if each of you could share maybe what that Dixie spirit is for you and what it means.
Well, I think back at the early days of one high school. I think back when everybody knew each other in high school. That doesn't exist now, but those were those strong roots. We come up, and Dixie was Dixie back then. Dixie College, 2-year school. This town has changed so much, and it's been discovered. There's so many people that we don't know anymore that are moving here. But Lyman, back in the day, you knew everybody in high school, and it was a close, tight-knit community, and that's how it still feels somewhat to me.
And that's what I wanted to ask you, Greg. Is that feeling still there? Even if we're 100 times more people, but is that feeling
I feel like
there?
it's still there when I bump into somebody like you at the grocery store, or because you still do bump into people you see. It's harder, it's tougher now because this is such a big town. You still bump into somebody from the old neighborhood. You still bump into somebody that you went to high school with, you haven't seen for a long time. And yeah, those feelings come back. I've had the opportunity to travel a lot in my life. And when I travel away from St. George, I can't get back here quick enough. And there's a lot of neat places, but St. George is special. It really is. And to think that I was born in 1967, I've seen this town grow from nothing to what it is today. And it's special to be a part of it. No, I was here when it was in its infant stages.
For me, I think the Dixie spirit means family, because I feel like everyone is your family. Like when you're out riding your bike and playing night games and stuff, you're all parented by all these parents that your parents know, and everyone's friends. And our dad was the perfect example of us. There was a time when we were all at the dealership working, and it was awesome. We were all there, and it was like, this is our dad's dream. Here we are. We've gone to college. We did it. And it was always nice to be able to brag who our parents were too, because everyone knew him. And I love that about it, because it's just like a family. The whole city, you knew everybody, and it is awesome. I love that too, and that's one of the reasons why I never wanted to move, because I like that feeling. And I like to be able to go, yeah, those are my parents. And I actually just had it happen today. Oh, I saw your family, and they're such great people, and it's so true. I'm so blessed. So lucky.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I agree. Some of my best memories or thoughts that give you the warm fuzzies are when I was in high school, I was almost like an only child at one point in my life. When I was in high school, my dad was the bishop, and weekly, if not daily, several times a week, everybody would, oh, your dad's the most amazing guy. And it's funny that my dad had said oh, my kids didn't really know. I was always watching, but I didn't know much. I just knew he was busy. He never sat still. Never sat down hardly, except to eat and sleep probably, and see us for a little bit in the day or whatever. But I think we were all mesmerized by all the things that he did, and he was so focused on helping other people. You can run a bunch of businesses and be a great guy, which he was, but everybody had something great to say about Ken Newby and how he helped them if they didn't have lunch money, or they were somewhere at a state basketball game and they couldn't get home, or your dad bought me lunch, and I'm like, when? How? Or, oh, I saw your dad here.
Maybe he was pulling it out of that ashtray.
He probably was. Hence the full ashtrays. No, it always felt good to be a newbie. It was something I was proud of. And I think us watching him run multiple businesses and in all these different avenues, I'm proud of what he's made the ranch today, even though I know very little about it. It's interesting to hear, to me, what my brother and my cousins and my dad do. That makes me proud, because I know he puts his heart and soul. He just doesn't do anything halfway. It's all good, and it makes us proud, and it's given us such a great example, and it's provided this longevity of our family, because now we're in our own ventures that he's shown us kind of the way, and we've formed N5. We have a group that puts us together, working together. Even though Lacy and I aren't really involved in the dealership, we have other things that we've done because of his support and him showing us you can do so much, not just one thing. But I'm just proud of where we came from.
And really, as my dad says, that our mom obviously is a huge part. She's the most
selfless person.
Giving. She's
think
amazing.
Of your mom as the quintessential Dixie mom.
For sure. Our biggest cheerleaders, because she's cheering my dad on building and living his dream, and building something for us that we are now enjoying. And then we're parents now, and we see that. We want that for our kids.
We want to raise our kids the way our mom raised us.
Yeah, it's incredible. We couldn't have picked any better parents.
I want to insert one little thing. Lacy didn't say anything, but she was the state's most valuable player playing soccer when she was at Dixie. She's got a beautiful trophy, and that's a great job.
So let the record show that Dad's looking very proud right now. And I know you feel that way about all your children and their great accomplishments. Ken, tell us what it is about this place that is special to you.
The thing Greg kind of hit on was we were all friends. When I see people that I knew in 1965 or 1970 or 80, I literally most give them a hug. And they do the same thing. You're meeting a long-lost cousin. But very few times during the day now do you see somebody you know. But the thing that I think really was the fact that there was opportunities here. Now, I didn't know how I was going to take advantage because I didn't have much. I came to St. George out of the Army with my wife and Russ, like I mentioned before, and $800. And that was the net worth of who me and my wife were. And so we took it from Boulder City, St. George, took advantage of all the growth opportunities, never went head over heels in debt that would pull you down, pull you under. If I did a project, I had the money to fix it or to make it work or to do it. And I always hired good help. Had some great people work for me. But St. George is a special place. Like we said, we've all seen it grow, but it's a wonderful place to live.
As you were sharing that, Ken, I'm just thinking you were the beneficiary of this place and what it offered for you. But you and your family have made it better, and you've come through that whole transitionary period from where you started to where you are now. And it's reflective of what this place is, where we started and where we are now. And I think that we as citizens are grateful to you and your family for all that you've done to make this such a great place. I just feel bad to have to cut this off, but we do have a bit of a time limit on our podcast, and we could just talk for another several hours because there's so much that we could share. But thank you. Thanks to each of you for what you've shared today and for spending this special time with us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Lyman, for having us.
The Doc Booth Foundation is dedicated to empowering individuals through educational opportunities and promoting mental health advocacy. Through scholarships and funding for important community needs, the foundation perpetuates the can-do spirit of the founders of this community, using the lessons of the past to chart the course for a better future. Make your tax-deductible donation at docboothfoundation.org. Not Forgotten is produced by Ricky Valadez and made possible by the generous support of St. George Area Zag Stores, industry-leading tech support and accessories. Lyman Hafen's books can be found at lymanhafen.com. Once I lived in Cottonwood and owned a little farm. When they called me down to Dixie, it caused me much alarm. To hoe the cane and cotton, I right away must go. But the reason why they sent me, I'm sure I do not know. We came to Dixie, and we called it home. Oh, in Dixie, we've lived and grown. But the reason why they sent me, I'm sure I do not know. The hot winds whirl around me and take away my breath. I've had the chills and fever till I'm nearly shook to death. All earthly tribulation